Hello, my name's Natalie Bowling. I'm a lecturer in psychology at the University of Greenwich. And today I'd like to talk about some of my research on perceptions of self and other in mirror sensory synesthesia. And what I hope to show through the talk is how mirror sensory synesthesia can be used as a model for investigating broader psychological phenomena. So first of all, what is it? So you've probably come across synesthesia before. Synesthesia is a condition in which the senses become crossed in a way that they aren't typically. So people might see coloured letters, for example, they might taste words, or they might see colours and shapes when they listen to music. Lots of different types of synesthesia. And in this particular type, what happens is that when people see somebody else being touched or in pain, they literally feel it on their own body. So mirror sensory synesthetes will feel vicarious sensations of touch or pain on their own body as if it's happening to themselves. And one of my research participants, Sheridan, sums this up really nicely. She says, there are some things that really annoy me. Like if she's on the train and someone's putting their makeup on the train, she says, if someone's putting on their eyeshadow, I can feel the brush across my eye. So it's a very vivid sensation. And within mirror sensory synesthesia, you have a couple of key subtypes. So there's mirror touch synesthesia, which is like what Sheridan describes, where people will mirror sensations of touch. This is relatively rare, about 2% of the population will experience this. And you also have mirror pain synesthesia. So vicarious responses to pain are much more common, estimates as high as 30% we've seen in our own research. So while it might seem like quite an extreme experience, it might actually be a lot more common than we think it is. And the reason why mirror sensory synesthesia is interesting for us to investigate is because we all vicariously perceive the experiences of others, even if we don't perceive them consciously. So several neuroimaging studies have shown that when we see somebody being touched, we all show activities in regions of the brain that are involved in when we experience touch ourselves. And that tells us that the way we all vicariously represent the experiences of others is in a similar way to how we represent our own. And in this way, we can think about a vicarious perception as lying on a continuum. So at the one end of this continuum, you would have the majority of people for whom vicarious perception is an unconscious process. And at the other end, once brain activity passes a certain threshold, you have individuals who will literally feel conscious vicarious sensations, as in mirror sensory synesthesia. So in this way, you can think of mirror sensory synesthesia as an extreme case of vicarious perception that we all undertake. And so we can use these experiences as a model for investigating the role of vicarious perception within social cognition. So what have we learned from mirror sensory synesthesia? So to give an example, it's widely reported that mirror sensory synesthetes have greater emotional empathy. So meaning that they mirror other people's emotional states as well as their physical states of touch and pain. I'll give some examples of the way people have described their synesthesia. One participant says, part of mirror touch synesthesia is that you have very strong empathy. You really do feel other people's pain. Someone says mirror touch makes me more sensitive to people's emotions. I feel more emotionally connected to people, which brings me happiness. And another says that if there's tension or sadness in a room, I can't help but feel it too. So lots of qualitative evidence for heightened empathy, and also on objective measures of empathy that we've used in the lab, we see that these people score higher on those objective measures as well. And so this suggests that we empathize with others' emotional states through a process of vicarious perception. And when vicarious perception is heightened, as in mirror-sensory synesthesia, then empathy is also heightened. And so if we can understand what's going on in mirror-sensory synesthesia, we can understand social cognition and empathy more generally. So that's one example, but what remains to be seen is whether mirror-sensory synesthesia can also help us understand how we represent the bodily self and how vicarious perception interacts with our sense of self. We looked at this across two studies, which I'll talk about today. So in study 1, we looked at bodily self-awareness. So we asked, do mirror-sensory synesthetes show trait differences in bodily self-awareness? And in study 2, we asked whether mirror-sensory synesthetes also showed distortions in representations of body size and shape, so the physical properties of the body. Okay, so starting off with bodily self-awareness, the rationale for this study came from theoretical suggestions that conscious vicarious perception might be driven by impairments in self and other awareness, so in a problem with distinguishing between the self and others. And if this is true, then we'd expect it to impact on the sense of self-awareness in daily life. But no study prior to this had investigated trait individual differences in self-awareness in mirror-sensory synesthetes in their everyday life. So that's what we set out to do. And we measured in this study self-reported interoceptive sensibility. That means your awareness of your internal bodily sensations, things like your heart rate, your breathing. And we also measured self-reported depersonalisation. That's a feeling of disconnection from the bodily self. This is a response that's often seen as a coping mechanism because it's often seen following trauma. And then we had participants complete our vicarious pain questionnaire. And in this questionnaire, participants have to watch several unpleasant videos of injuries and then say whether they felt any physical sensations of pain when they were watching the videos. Then if they said yes, they had to answer some follow-up questions about how painful it was, whether they felt it in a specific location in the body, and to describe it using different descriptors. We ran a cluster analysis on the responses and found that people were classified into one of three groups. The majority of people, around 70%, that was 432 people in our sample, were non-responders. That means they tended to not report any sensations of pain when watching the videos. We had a sensory localized group that we called them. This group tended to feel pain when they watched the videos. They tended to localize it to a specific body part, and they tended to use more sensory descriptors to describe what the pain felt like. So words like stabbing, tingling, things like that. Finally, we had a group that we called the affective generalized group. This was about 12% of the sample. And this group also described feeling pain when watching the videos. They tended to feel it more generalized all over the body and tended to use more affective descriptors, words like nauseating or terrifying, to describe how the pain felt. So in terms of the results, what we saw was that both the sensory localized and the affective generalized responders reported greater awareness of bodily sensations and bodily sensations related to emotions. In addition, we also saw that the affective generalized group also showed a greater tendency to self-regulate their awareness of their body sensations. And what we mean by that is that they tended to distract themselves from unpleasant sensations, but also more actively listen to the body for insights when needed. And what this might suggest is that distracting yourself from negative body sensations might be what makes it difficult for this group to localize the sensations of pain within their own body. And overall, what we can take away from this is that attention towards the body might heighten perception of vicarious sensations. Looking next at the depersonalisation results, here we saw both the sensory localised and the affective generalised groups reported greater experiences of depersonalisation compared with the controls. What this indicates is that maintaining a stable sense of your own body might be necessary to regulate vicarious perceptions of pain. So we know that's important sometimes to have to downregulate vicarious perception so as not to become overwhelmed when we're with someone who's in pain. The most obvious situation in which this has to happen is with doctors or medical practitioners. We know that this is important, and what this evidence suggests is that having a stable sense of self might help you to do that. And altogether, the results point towards the importance of self-awareness within vicarious perception. Okay, in this next project, we looked at the body model. This project was cut short because of the pandemic, so testing is still ongoing, or we hope to be ongoing soon, but I'll present some of the preliminary results. So the body model is an implicit representation of the size and shape of our body parts. And these representations are important for things like proprioception and action, being able to move around and navigate the world with our bodies. But these representations are typically distorted in healthy individuals. However, there appears to be some plasticity in these representations because they may be improved with training. For example, professional magicians who have experience in sleight of hand show more accurate representations of their hands. So suggesting that training and experience might build up a stronger, more accurate representation of the body. And how this relates to mirror sensory synesthesia is that we've seen anecdotal evidence that when observing images of distorted body shapes, mirror sensory synesthetes report feeling that the size and shape of their own body changes. One person says, "I love to stand in front of the Giacometti. It's a very good feeling. So I love to stand in front of them and feel I'm getting longer." Another participant said, "If I were to attend to a lamp or a potted plant, I feel my body become many of their elements. The roundness of the lamp or the hollow round sensation of the lamp shape. I sense my body shaped with the pointed characteristics of the branches of the plant and the smooth portions corresponding to its leaves." This is really nothing to do with mirroring other people's touch or pain sensations, which is really interesting, I think, that people with mirror sensory synesthesia report having these slightly out of body, unusual bodily experiences, but this hasn't been captured within the research up till now. So what this project was aiming to do was to find out whether atypical self-awareness that we've already seen in the last study in mirror sensory synesthesia, whether that extends to the body model. In this study, we had so far 6 verified mirror touch synesthetes, so that's a slightly more rare group, and 11 controls without synesthesia. Groups were matched in terms of age, and so far all the participants are Caucasian females. We had them complete 2 tasks. One was an explicit measure of their body size and shape representations. And what they had to do here was to look at different images of hands and decide whether it was wider or more slender than their own hand. You might see wider ones like this and more narrow ones like this. And then we take that information to build an explicit representation of the size and shape they perceive their hands to be. And they also had to do an implicit measure, which they were blindfolded and asked to point to different locations on their hand, so the tip of the index finger or the knuckle on the middle finger, for example. Then we took those locations they pointed to, we took photographs of where they pointed to, and put those locations together to build an implicit measure of the size and shape that they perceive their hands to be on those locations. So here are our preliminary results. On the y-axis here, you can see the estimation error. So basically a bigger number here means they were less accurate. We saw a trend towards slightly less accurate responses in the mirror sensory synesthete group. However, these differences were not significant. And so there were no significant differences here between mirror sensory synesthetes and non-synesthetes in the explicit representations of their hands. On the implicit measure as well, we didn't see any significant differences between synesthetes and non-synesthetes on the implicit measure either, although note that participants in general were much less accurate on the implicit task, in line with prior studies. What we aim to do now in a second study is to measure these representations when in the presence of another body. So while it appears that mirror sensory synesthetes don't differ at a baseline level in the accuracy of their representations of their bodies, what we'd like to go on to see is whether mirror sensory synesthetes body representations are modulated vicariously within a social context. So in this study, they were alone when they did the measurements, they couldn't see any other bodies. What happens if you're in the presence of another body that you can see? Does that vicariously impact on your sense of your own body? That's what we hope to go on to look at next. What we did see in the results is that implicit measures, the implicit measure of body representation was improved in older adults. We had a good range of age of participants here, which allowed us to look at this. And this fits with evidence that highly trained individuals like magicians were more accurate on this task. It suggests that lifetime experience through adulthood may also increase the accuracy of the implicit body model. Okay, so to summarize, working with mirror sensory synesthetes can help us to understand not only what causes these unique experiences in synesthesia, but can help us to understand how we all construct representations of the self and others. We saw in study 1 that bodily self-awareness may contribute to the regulation of vicarious perception of pain. And in ongoing projects, we're now looking at the extent to which perceptions of the bodily self may be modulated within a social context. Thank you very much for listening. I'd just like to thank my collaborators and my funders. Thank you.